All right, here we are with another episode of the podcast, still yet to be named podcast. So we're in January, it's pretty much mid-January. The real estate market is starting to pick up, starting to see buyers coming out of the woodwork. We're starting to see multiple offers on listings. Yeah, so we had our meeting yesterday talking about our listing process on our team, just going over it to make sure that we're all on the same page. Sometimes in business, especially when you have a team, when there's 4 or 5 or 6 of us, it's easy to think, well, I know what the system is, so it's a system. But if everybody on the team doesn't know it, then you don't have a system. And a lot of that's like back end stuff that we were talking about, checklists and, how we keep communication on our end and how we're keeping the clients, how we're communicating with the clients, keeping them updated. Who's responsible for that communication at what points and stuff like that. But I was reminded yesterday of one important aspect of that, something that we have again taken for granted on our team, and I think we're all on the same page on this, but it's still it boggles my mind that other agents, they're putting listings up on a Tuesday or a Wednesday afternoon. They get one showing on Wednesday night. They've got more buyers that want to come and see the house Thursday, Friday, Saturday. They've got an open house scheduled for Sunday. One buyer comes through on Wednesday afternoon, makes them an offer, and they take the offer on Wednesday night, 6 hours after they listed it. And it's crazy to me that sellers are willing to leave all of those other potential offers, all those other potential buyers, and all that potential money that those buyers may be willing to offer, right? They're leaving all of that on the table. These agents are not guiding them in the process. And these agents are even out there celebrating, we sold this house in 6 hours. Look at me, I'm so great. The market sold that house. You didn't do anything. And all what you should have done is guide your client on the process so that they knew that when they accepted an offer, it was the best offer for them for their house. Nobody has any idea what the next 2 or 3 offers might have looked like on a house that nobody else has seen. One buyer came in, one buyer made an offer, seller hurried up and accepted it. Buyer probably gave them a deadline and said, we want an answer by tonight. I mean, why do you think the buyer would do that? Because it's in their best interest. So as the seller's agent, we're supposed to be consulting and coaching our clients on what's in their best interest. Our seller clients, what's in their best interest, what's going to be the best possible outcome for them. And nobody knows what's the best possible outcome. We can speculate and we can project. We bring our professional, expertise into the transaction and into the process for our sellers. At the end of the day, I don't know what somebody out there is going to be willing to pay, but we know the steps that we can take to make sure that the person who's willing to, presumably, we assume the person that's willing to pay the most amount of money is going to come sometime in the first week or the first weekend, the first couple of days. Well, let's at least make sure we get them a chance to come in the door. So, I mean, I've seen that twice in the last 48 hours. So yeah, I mean, that's what I wanted to jump off with. What are your thoughts on that, Kelly? What are your questions?
So I know in 2020 they were kind of like a bidding war. Mm-hmm. So is that still common to see in the current market? So is that worth to wait if you already got a pretty good offer?
Well, that's the question, right? Is what's a pretty good offer and what's the best offer? So bidding wars are not as common, but of course it's the second week of January. We're just coming out of the holidays. The fall, the parts of fall, October, which is pretty much the one little month or couple of weeks in that fall season where we do see a kind of a little spike of business. It's slow in September, spikes up in September. November and December could be hit or miss every other weekend depending on the calendar and where Thanksgiving falls and where Christmas falls, which day of the week and all of that. Like this year, I mean, Thanksgiving's always on a Thursday, but I think it was maybe late in the month. Christmas was on a weekend, New Year's was on a weekend. So pretty much every weekend from the end of November through now was pretty much shot for most people in terms of shopping for a house. The interest rates went up at the beginning of October, so we didn't see the spike at the beginning of October. We saw it push back a little bit, and the beginning of November, we started to see some more market activity. We had homes that we listed in second week of September and said, hey, it's going to be slow for a couple weeks, but in October, this is what we expect to see. The traffic was there, but the offers were not necessarily there. Buyers were more reluctant to put in offers because of the shock of the interest rates. Now, after a month of those interest rates not going down, what we started to see was buyers, coming back, saying, you know what, we waited 4 weeks, we waited 5 weeks, we're not going to wait any longer, we got to do this. So homes that we listed in September that were selling in November. And then not a whole lot between the end of November and now. So again, nobody has a crystal ball, and nobody knows exactly what's going to happen. If we look at that little bit of activity that was happening in November, and we see that as just a glimpse of the demand that is still out there from buyers, then there's no reason, as the weather gets a little better, as the holidays are now over, the kids are back in school, life is getting a little bit back to normal, interest rates have gone down a little bit. I have to say that again, interest rates have gone down a little bit. The news is not talking about it. Interest rates have gone down a little bit, especially if you're, working with a good loan officer, a good broker who can talk to you about points, who can talk to you about 2-1 buy downs, who can talk to you about different programs and options that are out there for you. I mean, we are seeing people that are, getting into houses at 5%, 5.5% interest rates. It is not going to get too much better than that. It might get cheaper, with those points and buy downs and things like that. There's a cost associated with those. So 5% may become more like the norm, but if you're waiting for it to go down to 3%, there's not a whole lot of signs out there that that's coming. So right now we're in a pretty good spot. I mean, again, it's still mid-January. We'll see where we're at February and March. The market, seasonal demand will continue to pick up. Hopefully inventory picks up. I think that's even more important than interest rates. I'm pretty sure that we talked about this last week. But we are seeing multiple offer situations starting to pop up on these listings that are marketed well with, professional photos. Maybe they're staged, they're move-in ready, or they're presented as being move-in ready. Yeah, there's definitely demand. There's not a lot of listings. Supply is low, demand is still high. You're going to be seeing multiple offers. It's not going to be 15 buyers on every single listing like what it was in 2020. And I think that's the thing is these agents think like, well, the market now kind of sucks, so let's just list it whenever and take what we can get. We might list it on Tuesday and we might not even get any showings until the weekend anyways. But here we are. Homes are listing on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and they're selling on Wednesday. And, the buyers that wanted to go see it on Thursday and Friday and that were planning to go to the open house, they're not even getting a chance to look at it. You could make the assumption that, the serious buyers or the ones that are eager, the ones that are going to move aggressively are probably not waiting until Sunday for the open house. I mean, okay, that's fine. But what about that serious buyer that was at work all day on Wednesday when you listed the house, saw it at 6 p.m., texted their agent, said, hey, can we go see this house tomorrow? There's, an opening at 2 and 4. This is literally my experience from yesterday. Buyer, client, somebody that I've been talking to for a few months, starting to see listings come on the market a little bit, starting to see the inventory pick up. They don't really want to wait around anymore. They sent me a listing, just listed yesterday. They sent it to me at 6 p.m. last night. They say, we're free after 2 tomorrow. Looked at my calendar. I said, we'll be here recording the podcast until about, 3 o'clock, whatever. Can you do 4:30? They said, yeah. So I go and I look. Well, 4:30 is not available. It's already booked up. They already have appointments. There's an opening at like 2 and an opening at 7. So I thought about it. I'm like, well, I'll call Kelly, whatever. She can meet me over there. You can come with me for the showing. Then we'll come back and record after that. Or, we'll figure it out. I don't want them to miss the house because of my podcast schedule. I'm an agent first. Podcasts are way down on the list. And I reached out to the agent. I said, because they had some availability on Friday too, but I'm thinking, well, they got Thursday pretty well booked up. Don't know, they might get an offer. It might not be a good idea to wait until Friday. These buyers are serious. They are ready to go. By the way, these buyers are paying cash. They're not using a mortgage. They will probably do home inspections, but this is not their first house, not their first rodeo. They are not first-time home buyers who are going to be shook up by every single thing on an inspection report. There's a chance they may even want to waive inspections. I doubt it. I'm certainly not going to recommend that. I don't think you're going to be seeing that a lot in the market anymore. But there's always that chance, if the house was perfect and that's what they had to do to get it, they probably would. Reached out to the agent. I said, do you have any offers yet? She said, well, I'm expecting one, possibly a second one, get them over there as soon as possible. So I said, all right, I'm going to book the 2:00 appointment. Reached back out to the client, said, hey, sorry for all the back and forth. They're pretty booked up tomorrow. Let's get in there at 2:00. There's another house they wanted to see also. That one's got a little more room in the schedule. I said, we'll figure that one out later. Let's get into this one at 2:00. Agent texts me back like 5 minutes later. They're accepting the offer.
Oh, no.
You're showing, your appointment for 2 p.m. is canceled. We can't wait another 18 hours. We have to accept this offer right now. And it's like, not only was there my showing, but there was all those other showings. The afternoon was pretty well booked up. They could have gotten, they were expecting a second offer. Mine could have been the third, and they could have gotten one more. So they could have had 4 offers to choose from. Why would that buyer come in and ask for a response right away?
May I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
So in this situation, if you accept the offer, and then so after you accept the offer, can you still let other people to see the house?
That's a good question. So yes, when you put the house into contingent status on our MLS, a lot of people ask, like, what's the difference between pending and contingent and under contract? As far as the consumers are concerned, there's not much difference. It all means that the seller accepted an offer and the house is pretty much spoken for. On the back end, us agents, members of our MLS, looking at our MLS database, they use the terminology either contingent or under contract. If it's contingent, it's got a C next to it. That means you can continue to show it. I think the idea behind that is the agreement or the offer that was accepted is contingent on certain things, or there's contingencies in that agreement. So it's not 100% until it's closed. So as long as it's in that contingent status, the sellers are willing to entertain backup offers and they're willing to continue to show the house. I would say most agents, listing agents, don't understand that that's what that even means. So I've had it before where a house is in contingent status and I reach out and go, hey, are they really entertaining backup offers? Can I take my client to go see it? And they go, what are you, nuts? We already accepted an offer. I'm like, well, technically you have it in contingent status. Technically, the rules and regulations of our MLS say if you won't show it to my clients, then you're in violation because you have it listed in the wrong status and you're not being fair to me and my clients. So you can get fined. Now, I would never report anybody for that because the seller doesn't want to show their house. They don't want to show their house, regardless of what the letter is next to the listing in the MLS. But the right way for them to do it, the correct way would be if they're not willing to entertain backup offers, they're not willing to show the house anymore, put it into that U status or that under contract status. Now, I see agents do it the wrong way. They'll leave it in contingent status until the inspection contingency period is over, and then they move it into under contract status. You still have a mortgage contingency, appraisal contingency. I mean, anything can happen right up until the day of the closing. Even with no contingencies, the buyer can still back out. So there's nothing in the standard agreement of sale in Pennsylvania between the buyer and the seller that says one way or the other that the seller is not allowed to continue to market their house. So even if no contingencies, nothing, the seller can continue to show their house to anybody who wants to come see it for up until the closing. Most buyers, however, are not interested in going to see a house that there's probably about an 85% chance that they're never going to have a shot at. It's about a 15% fall through rate statistically in the market in general. Now, if a seller has a backup offer in place, that might, juice that number a little bit. That might make the seller a little less likely to want to negotiate with their current buyer, which might increase the likelihood that that current buyer, may terminate and want to walk away if they're not getting what they want post-inspection. That's another good thing to keep in mind. That agent never reached out and said, hey, we're really getting pushed here. We weren't expecting this. Frankly, I think I messed up by listing it on a Wednesday afternoon and allowing showings right away. But how serious, how motivated, how qualified is your buyer? Would they like to come in and see it anyways? Would they be interested in putting in a backup offer? The agent never had, we never had that conversation. And frankly, in my client's best interest, I'd rather go and show them the other house that they were looking at that didn't have as much competition, because we have a better chance of getting that one for a better deal. I don't think the one that's sold with multiple offers is all that much better than this one either. So that's the funny thing. But we'll find out soon enough, I guess.
If seller already take the offer,
yeah,
and if they get a higher offer after the house already went a contingent, like, do they have to pay a fine for like breach of contract? Does it count as a breach?
That's a good question. Yeah. So there's very little contingency, or whatever you want to call it, protection in the contract, in the standard agreement of sale in Pennsylvania. There's very little room for the seller to back out of the sale. There's actually, as far as I know, and I'm not a broker, not an attorney, not supposed to interpret contracts, but my opinion, I think there's only one place in the contract that allows the seller to terminate. There's plenty of opportunities for the buyer to terminate, whether it's one of those elected contingencies or it's somewhere else in there where it says, if we don't like the results of the title search, if the municipality comes back and gives us a problem, if the seller's financial status changes, meaning like the seller goes into bankruptcy or something, and they say, hey, we need a little more time, buyer can walk away. Buyer can walk away, and the seller, according to the contract, has to reimburse them for their home inspections and appraisals and any costs that they have into it, as well as refunding their earnest money. Talked to another agent about a situation like that the other day. But there is nowhere in there really that opens the door for the seller to say, hey, we've got a better offer, a higher offer, we're going to take that one instead. Okay. So you guys are out the door, we'll see you, goodbye. It would have to be a situation where the buyer terminates. So typically what would happen is, like, buyer does their home inspection, they come back and they say, we want a new roof, we want this, we want that, we want that. Seller's agent goes to their backup offer, or goes to one of the agents who has a client that's interested. They say, would you be interested in making a backup offer? Here's all the information we have. The current buyer did a home inspection and they found there's a leak in the roof. We weren't aware of that, so we're just closing it to you as a new potential buyer now. Given that there's a leak in the roof, would you still be interested in buying it for this price? Or would you still be interested in beating maybe not the initial offer that our buyer made, but in light of all the repairs and additional costs that they're now asking for, the buyer's trying to renegotiate, would you be willing to beat what they're now offering? And if that second buyer says, yeah, we'll do that, there's a choice. They can execute a contract between second buyer and seller. They can do that whenever. That contract would, if the seller is smart, that contract is going to be contingent on the first sale terminating. So all the terms of the agreement have already been negotiated between the seller and the second buyer. Everything's been executed. As soon as that first sale terminates, that second sale becomes automatic. Becomes in effect, I guess. But the seller then has to go back to the buyer and say, hey, we're not willing to do any of the things that you asked for. We've got another backup offer who's willing to take it as is. The buyer can then say, oh, whoa, we didn't, you're scaring us. Yeah, we'll stay in it. We were just, our agent told us to just ask for it. Not the worst that could happen is you could say, no, we didn't even know anything about a backup offer. And then they take it. That first buyer has first right of refusal, essentially. That's the way I look at it. There might be different interpretations out there. Certainly been in situations on both sides where we've negotiated a backup offer, for one of our buyers or for one of our sellers. That was a lot more likely to happen in 2020 and 2021, or even in a case like this one yesterday. There's probably contingencies in that offer. If they had 4 offers they know where those three other buyers stand. That first buyer comes back after inspection and says, hey, I want this, I want that, I want you to take $10,000 off the price. All right, let's go to the second buyer in our line. We already know where they were at. They were only $5,000 less. Let's go back to them and ask them if they still hold that offer in light of this new information. They go back to that buyer who lost that house by $5,000, still hasn't found another house. And they go, oh my God, we'll do it. We'll take it. Whatever you need. We'll come up in price. We thought that we were going to get it. We didn't think we were going to have to come up in price. We regret that we didn't. And if we're getting a second chance at it, we'll do whatever it takes. And then that, you've got a buyer who's eager to get the sale done. Obviously, you've got a seller who wants to get the sale done. Those can be a win-win situation for everybody except for the buyer who went in and, asked the seller to make a whole bunch of repairs to a house. Sellers don't like renegotiating at all. If you're the buyer and you think, we're going to do a home inspection and then we're going to come back and ask for all this stuff, it is a negotiation. The seller does have to agree to it. The seller doesn't want to do anything. So anything that you ask for, above and beyond nothing is more than what the seller wants to do. The seller wants to see that reply to inspection that says we'll take the house as is. That rarely happens. So I think it's our jobs as agents to kind of explain to the sellers that, hey, these renegotiations are very common. It's not they're trying to do a bait and switch necessarily. It's not, they know that they've got you where they want you, so now they're gonna, come in and ask for this stuff. It is that, but that's not the buyer's intention. That's not the way the buyers are looking at it. The buyers are looking at it like this is just totally normal. Our home inspector, our agent, all these people told us this is how it works. Something's broken, ask the seller to fix it. And sellers are going, it wasn't a new house. Why do they think that, they're buying a house, they're not buying a refrigerator. Why do they want me to fix the refrigerator? They can buy their own refrigerator, but buyers don't look at it that way. So then you become, you get to this place where it's like, do you want to just eat the cost of the refrigerator or do you, and not lose the sale, or do you really want to go back on the market with a broken refrigerator and try to resell the house, right? So we talked about pricing strategy and all of that yesterday at our meeting too. Jeremy was saying, we can price the house high and wait for that one buyer who's willing to pay that price. Depending on how long it takes, that one buyer may know they're the only buyer, so they may not be willing to pay the price anyways. They may still try to negotiate you down. And then when you go into home inspections, what happens? They know you don't have any backup offers. They know you were on the market for a month and nobody else wanted to buy it. So they're going to come back and ask for even more stuff because they do have you right where they want you. Price the house right, market it effectively, put it on the market on the right day of the week. Thursday's the best day of the week to list your home for sale. Don't start showings until Friday or Saturday. If you're going to do an open house, do it on Saturday, not Sunday, or do both. Get the maximum number of buyers through that door that you possibly can. Get feedback. Get multiple offers if that's what the market's going to bring you. And then you know where you stand. You know where your leverage is. You know where you stand. That way, if the buyer comes back and wants to try to push you around later based on where they think you stand, at least you have an accurate idea of, you can assess your leverage and you know what grounds you have to negotiate and how far you can kind of push back without losing that buyer and finding yourself in a spot where you're going to wish, I wish we would have just fixed the refrigerator and not lost that buyer and not been back on the market and all of that stuff. So that's a little bit about what's happening out there in the listing world right now. Just starting to see it within the last couple of days, but I think it's going to continue to pick up here as we get further into January and into February.
Actually, I have one more question about houses on the market. So I have friends that they haven't really started looking seriously, but they see houses that's in great location, the price is great.
Yeah.
But they're wondering why the house has been on the market for a long time and nobody has bought it.
Mm-hmm. Well, what's a long time?
60 days or even 100 days, but the house looks new, everything looks, the picture looks great.
Yeah. So, there could be some reasons for that when you get into it. Maybe it's not as good as what's in the pictures, but if you look at 100 days ago, 90 days is about 3 months. So where's that put us? December, November, October. Plus 10 days. Today's the 12th. That puts you on like October 1st. We listed a bunch of houses on October 1st. Like, I think we listed 3 houses on October 1st. It was a Saturday. That was the first day we allowed showings. Friday, September 30th, the day before, I'm pretty sure, is the day that the Fed increased their interest rate and the rates went from 5% to 7%.
Oh, wow.
So we still had traffic, but every buyer that came through the door was like, how about them interest rates? I bet that's going to hurt you guys. And we're like, not if you buy this house. But they didn't. Some of those houses, I think, like I said, we listed 3. I think 2 of them actually did sell in that first weekend. But, there was buyers who needed to move. There's always going to be buyers who need to move. We had a couple homes that sat, again, until like mid-November. Some of the homes did not sell in mid-November. We, overestimated price or value of what we thought the house was going to be worth. Buyers are not even willing to entertain overpaying for a house right now when they calculate their interest rates and stuff like that. So in 2020, 2021, they were looking at interest rates. The rates were going down every week. They were looking at what they could afford. And then the next week, rates went down and it was like, hey, we can afford more than the week before. Plus, they were putting in offers on house and they were getting beat out in bidding wars. So then they were going, okay, the next one we got to spend more. Even if the next house isn't as good as the last house, in their mind, they know we got to spend more. So buyers would keep bidding up. They bid on 3 or 4 houses. They bid more on each one than the last one, even if the house wasn't as good as the last one. And what's happening now is the opposite. They have a price point in mind. Let's say they're shopping up to $600,000. There's not a lot of inventory, so 3 weeks go by, and they say, well, we're thinking about increasing our price range. Let's call the lender. Let's see what he says. Is 600 really the max number we can qualify for? And they call the lender, and the lender's like, actually, 550 is now the max number you can qualify for because the rates went up, or whatever the case may be. And so now, not only are they not looking at 600, but they're not even excited to go out and look at houses that are 550 because, in their minds, their affordability and their, the supply of what's available to them in their price range just shrunk and decreased. And now they're sacrificing and now they're settling. So the market has gotten more price sensitive. There's probably some really good deals out there right now on houses that have been on the market for 100 days that have kind of flown under the radar. Maybe pictures weren't good. Maybe there's houses you go in and they're better than the pictures. But yeah, there's houses you go in and they're worse. So it could be a number of reasons, but I wouldn't roll out anything without going to at least look at it just because somebody else didn't want it, right? Everybody's situation's a little different too. What's the perfect house for me might not be the perfect house for you. So that whole thought process, that whole ideology of, I'm going to wait and see if anybody else wants this house before I decide if I want it. That's how you get into bidding wars in the first place, right? If you like the house, you're going to do a home inspection. Most buyers are not more educated than other buyers. Like the average home buyer doesn't know what they're looking at. They have to do a home inspection to even get any insight at all into the condition of the house. So a buyer goes in and looks at it and goes, well, we love it, but how come nobody else does? What do they know that we don't know? They don't know anything that you don't know. Most buyers out there do not know anything that you don't know. And if you're working with a good agent, the buyers certainly don't know more than what your agent knows if you're working with a good agent. So do it, get a home inspection. Unless the house has been sold and back on the market and already had 3 home inspections, then maybe there's something there that you're not aware of. If the house looks good, go and take a look at it. See, there's some good deals out there, I'll bet. Those good deals are going to disappear in the next couple weeks. They're going to get scooped up. So there's going to be people that are waiting and going, oh, well, I wonder if somebody else will buy it first. And then somebody else buys it. It's like, oh, I guess it was a good house. That's not going to get you anywhere. So go out, look at the house, put in the offer, get the home inspection. By the end of all that, if there's nothing wrong with the house, go through with it. Close on it. Move in. Live in it. Live there for 2 years. Live there for 3 years. Sell it again at the end of that. Like, you're not stuck there for the rest of your life. A lot of people think they're stuck in their home for the rest of their life because they bought in 2020 and it was stressful and they never want to do that again. But the market's going to go back to normal. You can buy a house, you can move again in 3 years. Trying to find a house that's going to last you 50 years is going to make it more stressful than what it needs to be, because there's probably no house out there that's going to be perfect for you in every stage of your life for the next even 10 years, let alone 20, 30, 40, 50. So
yeah, there's no perfect house. You just have to value what's more important to you.
Yeah, at the time, right? And 5 years from now, that might change. It's not like, oh my God, I made a bad decision 5 years ago because we loved this house for that 5 years, but now it doesn't work anymore. Like, sell it, go and buy another one. I saw a study, this was on our blog a couple days ago. The Truth About Negative Home Equity Headlines is the title of the article on our blog. So there was a study done by the Black Knight, which is an economist. They do research for the economy and mortgage rates and things like that. And the headline's kind of scary. The headline says, of all homes purchased with a mortgage in 2022, 8% are now at least marginally underwater. So even the headline's not as scary as I think what they wanted it to be, because they have to throw in things like, with a mortgage, at least marginally underwater. Like, so it's not 8% of all people are underwater. It's 8% of the people that purchased a home in 2022 are now at least marginally underwater, and nearly 40% have less than 10% equity stakes in their home. So, and then I saw somewhere else in the body of the article that 25% of people who bought a home in 2022 with an FHA or VA mortgage, I don't know if it was underwater, but they have very little equity in their home. And that sounds like, oh my God, prices are going down. People are underwater, because we didn't even hear that word underwater. You probably never even heard it, right?
So what does that even mean?
Yeah, when I bought my house in 2012, everybody was talking about underwater, underwater, underwater. That means you owe more on your mortgage than what the house is worth.
Oh, okay.
You owe more on the mortgage than what the house is worth. You can't sell the house unless you can get somebody to pay more than what it's worth. You can't sell the house for what it's worth because that's not enough to pay off your mortgage, so you're stuck. So you either have to short sale, or the house gets foreclosed, or you just stay there forever. Or you move on, you can rent the house out. Like, there's always options. But everybody was worried in 2010, 2011, 2012, am I going to be underwater? Am I going to overpay for this house and be stuck in it? There has never been a time other than 2020 and 2021 where it was a good idea to buy a house if you knew that you were going to be selling it and moving again in the next 2 years. First of all, if you sold the house for more than what you bought it for, in less than 2 years, you have to pay capital gains tax typically. So that's one reason why, if you know you're going to be moving in less than 2 years, obviously you'd rather the house appreciates and becomes worth more. You're going to have to pay taxes, which could potentially put you underwater, I guess. Or, if the house doesn't appreciate in value, by the time you pay closing costs on buying and selling, you're basically underwater. Or if the house does depreciate 1 or 2%, then you're down 1 or 2% in your value, so you may be underwater. Now, FHA and VA, you're talking about buyers who are putting 3.5% down or even 0% down. So yes, if you put 0% down on your house, usually they roll the funding fees and all of that into the loan. So the loan might actually be higher than the value of the house by a couple $1,000s. Wow. If you bought your house for $120,000, let's just say, you took out a loan for $125,000 12 months ago, yeah, you were underwater the day you bought it.
Yeah.
Right? So even if that house is appreciated 1 or 2%, and you're paying a 3, 4, 5, 6% interest rate, amortization, you're paying more interest at the beginning, less on the principal, more in interest at the beginning of the loan, you're going to be in a bad spot. That's not new. That's not a sign of a bad market. That's a sign of any normal home market. Now, again, there's solutions. Keep the house, rent it for 2 years, and then you might catch up. Amortization, you start putting more of your payment towards the principal. The value goes up 2%, went up 2% this past year, in Pittsburgh anyways. Some of these markets that might not be true. These are national headlines. in our market, price went up 2%. This year it goes up 2% again. Next year it goes up 2% again. The $120,000 house is now worth like $130,000. You took out that loan for $125,000. You've been paying on it. Maybe you owe $116,000 or something like that. There's $14,000 there to work with. If you sell it for $130,000, your closing costs and all that are going to be about $10,000, $11,000. So you've got a little $3,000 cushion there, right? So rent the house out for 2 years. Now, you might not be able to afford to buy another house. You might not qualify to carry 2 mortgages at the same time. So you may have to rent the house you're living in while you're simultaneously renting out your current house to someone else. If I'm going to go off on another tangent about that, rents have gone up and are continuing to project. So your $125,000 house, that your mortgage payments $950 or $1,000 a month, you could probably rent for $1,100 or $1,200. So there's even probably profit built into that. Now you might have to pay $1,500 for the house that you're renting, that you're living in. So, it's not going to be great, but it's not. It doesn't have to be the end of the world. And if we look at that number of only 8% of all the houses that sold in 2022 are marginally underwater, that's a pretty small number. How many of that 8% are going to have to move in the next year? Probably not many. We know that people are staying in their home on average for 10 years. That number's too long. I just said, biggest problem that everybody has in the market is people are staying in their house forever. They're trying to buy a house that they can stay in forever. They don't want to move out of their current house because they think it's going to be too hard to buy a house. Yeah, we got a blinking light here. But so if the average person's staying in their house 10 years, then out of the 8% of people that are marginally underwater by 1 or 2%, how many of them are going to need to sell in the next year? It's going to suck for some of those people in some of those markets. But if we're talking about the market in general, it's not going to have like an impact on the market. It's not going to be a wave of foreclosures. It's not going to be a wave of short sales. It's not going to be, your neighbors selling their house for $100,000 just to get out of it because they can't afford their mortgage anymore. So now every house in the neighborhood has gone down in value. We're not going to see that. We're still dealing with, across the country, again, knowing that most of the people that live in homes didn't buy it within the last 12 months. They've been in there a little bit longer. Even if they bought it 24 months ago, they'd appreciated 13% in the first 12 months and then only 2% after that. So they've still got 15% appreciation. If they put 5% down and they've continued paying their mortgage for the last 24 months, they've probably got 17, 18% equity in their house.
That's pretty good.
For 2 years, that's pretty good. Like, you can't put money into a savings account and get 18%, return on investment. So, and that's less than 2 years. Again, I said the rule of thumb is like 2 years, right? We're talking about, anywhere from 14, 15 to 24 months. If you bought your home in that time period, you're probably sitting pretty good. It's really just the people who bought their home 6 to 12 months ago. And 8% of the people that bought a house. I think it might be safe to say that 8% of the people did overpay for their house. That's quite possible. That house that's sitting on the market, that's been on the market for 100 days, the sellers priced that house at the price that they wanted and weren't paying enough attention to what the market was saying that it was going to be worth. 6 months earlier, if they did that, there was so much demand out there and buyers were saying, hey, we need to buy a house now and our interest rate's great. Let's overpay a little bit. It's going to be $30 more a month on our mortgage payment. It's not a big deal. We'll sacrifice, we'll stop going to Starbucks one day a week or whatever. And we'll be able to afford it. Let's just get the house. That's the most important thing. So they were overpaying for the house. Let's just say that's 8% of the people that were buying houses. That's not a huge number. It's not the same as what everybody thinks, that everyone overpaid for their house, that everybody in the market's underwater, that everybody's screwed. Prices have not gone down yet. Prices are not projected to go down in most areas. I did see another study from Zillow, I think it was, where they were talking about markets in California. LA was going to go down like 2%. It was even just a part of LA. San Francisco was going to go down like 4%.
Oh, wow.
There was like 6 other markets in between those 2 cities in California where it was going to go up 1, 2, 3% in appreciation. In Pennsylvania, in Pittsburgh, you're not going to see depreciation. San Francisco's 4% depreciation. They probably had 40% appreciation in the last 3 to 3 years, right? So Pittsburgh's been more stable than that. So you're not going to see the need for prices to go down. You're not going to see, if this is 8% of people are marginally underwater, it might only be 2% in Pittsburgh, but it might be 20% in California, in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's why, it averages out across the country to 8%. We're in a pretty stable market here in Pittsburgh and Western Pennsylvania, and I think we're going to be safe. And I think if there's homes sitting on the market out there, sellers are going to need to be negotiable. If you're a buyer, this could be the perfect time for you to go in, make an offer. If nothing else, even if its price is, questionable, you can still get all the other terms you want. Do the home inspections, get all the contingencies, get the appraisal contingency. The bank's going to come in and do an appraisal. They're going to determine what they think it's worth. And if that number comes in low, you probably are in a better chance to go back and renegotiate with that seller. Because again, when the house has been sitting on the market for 100 days, that seller's got a little less leverage in the negotiations. It's very important, though, who you are working with as your agent, because they're going to be your consultant. They're going to be your point of contact. They're going to be the key communicator in that negotiation between you and the counterpart, whether you're the buyer and seller. So I think that's very important. I think the quality and the negotiation skills that the agents have can dictate anywhere from 1 to 10% of the price right now, based on their negotiation skills.
I see. Well, she was asking me about a house, so maybe I'll be her agent one day.
There you go. You can help her negotiate. We'll get her in there now before somebody else buys it. And then hurry up and go get your license so we can actually pay you for it.
Yep. So as you mentioned about Pittsburgh being in the stable market, is being stable a good thing?
It's not a bad thing, I don't think. I would say that being stable is a good thing. There's agents in California that made a whole... I'm looking at the agent's perspective, but let's look at the seller's perspective because that's what's important. There's agents and sellers who made a whole ton of money on their houses in San Francisco, but, there's a whole lot of buyers right now that could be losing a little bit of money on their houses in San Francisco. So I'll take stability. I think it's a good thing for us in our market. We don't have to worry about the extreme economic impact that those areas like that have to worry about. And also when people in areas like that can't afford to live there anymore, or they're selling their house at a loss, where are they going to go? They're going to be looking for cities like Pittsburgh where they can afford a house, where we have, some tech jobs and stuff like that they can still do. That's why the past couple of years, some of those tech companies from San Francisco have been moving their offices here to Pittsburgh. Some of them have been shutting down, unfortunately, but some of them are still open, and it's it's not a big enough job sector that it's going to devastate our economy if they did shut down, but it certainly has helped over the past few years. So stable is, I think, a good thing.
Yeah, I also heard a lot of people in California are moving to Texas. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Lower taxes on income, property, and pretty much everything. So.
And lower housing prices, yeah.
Lower housing prices at the beginning, but I think the demand got so high that those prices have really kind of spiked. I think some people in Texas are probably upset that they can't even afford to buy a home in their hometown. Yeah. Probably still lower than California, but when you factor in the taxes, I mean, it's much lower. If your income is being taxed at like 40%, then and you're you can pay 40% more for a house and it's a break even, I guess, 40%. In a way. Yeah, that's a lot. So, well, let's wrap it up then. That is the podcast for this week. So what do we talk about? We talked about the market, where we're going these next few weeks or where we see it going. What is the ideal strategy out there if you are thinking about selling a house? What mistake not to make? As a buyer, what mistake not to make, which I think is waiting to see what everybody else is going to do. And we talked about appreciation. We talked about people being underwater on their mortgage. We talked about the stability of the market here in Pittsburgh and across the country, disputed headlines a little bit. And yeah, I think we covered a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully you get some value out of this. If you've been watching it all this time, thank you. Please subscribe, like, follow, depending on which social media platform you are watching this on. We'll keep you posted. How about that? We'll keep you posted on everything that's going on in the real estate market so that you can protect your biggest investment, whether you're buying or selling that investment or investing in real estate here in Pittsburgh or elsewhere. So thanks for watching, and that's it. We'll see you.
See you.